Well, here we are, Fixing RWBY Volume 7. I'd be lying if I said this wasn't an ordeal. On paper, the canon RWBY Volume 7 isn't actually that bad in isolation. In fact, it might be one of the strongest volumes of the series in terms of writing. It's really a lot of the elements before and after that drag it down most severely. That's not to say that it doesn't have problems on its own terms, such as a massive amount of character bloat, some floating themes that are never quite capitalized on, and a strangely out-of-place political allegory for an incredibly divisive election here in the United States. Aside from that last one, however, it wasn't anything out of the ordinary for RWBY. But then comes into the fact that this is Fixing RWBY and the ever-increasing departures from canon necessitated by previous changes. And we've got a boiling pot of mess. Then throw in the fact this is the first Fixing RWBY being made after the closure of Rooster Teeth and RWBY's acquisition by Viz, leaving the future of the series in a perpetual state of limbo. We've already bent the rules in Fixing RWBY Volume 6 by only leaving ourselves about 2 volumes of buffer, but now we're in the wilds. We've had to start planning ahead in ways that we've never had to before, and it's certainly been taxing. For Volume 7 alone, we probably went through 7 or 8 different revisions of the overall plot, different character arcs, and who would even be in the volume. There were things that we loved that we had to cut, there were things that we were frustrated by that we had to work around, and overall it took us months to iron everything out. That said, I think we nailed it. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But is it solid? I certainly think so. Is it entertaining? Hell yes it is. I want to send a special thank you out to JJ Bass and Mixed Coffee for the immeasurable help they've been in the writing process. They were instrumental in the last 2 volumes, but now they are downright vital for this one. Even more thanks goes out to Mupa Mova, I Know Nothing, and Twilight Guardian, who beta read this script and gave us their feedback, which was absolutely necessary. And as always, a massive thank you to the Sketchy Huntsmen, whose illustrations are going to bring this volume to life. Now then, let's get into it. Fixing RWBY, Volume 7. Kanpai, everyone! We open on a shelf of mantle, the horizon and shoreline bisecting the screen. Team RWBY's Manta comes flying in below the camera. We jump inside where we find the sleeping forms of John, Nora, Roman, Blake, and Yang, while Ren and Weiss are having a quiet chat in the corner with morning tea. The camera pans up through the hold to the cockpit, where RWBY is co-piloting for Crow, and Neo is showing her how to operate the Manta's controls. It's a quiet moment as RWBY points to small parts of the control panel and correctly or incorrectly identifies them, with nods or head shakes from Neo. Crow is busy flipping through his scroll, and when he finally has a signal, he attempts to dial Ironwood's number. It rings a couple of times before returning with a "Your call cannot be connected." Crow sighs and puts it down. After a few moments, RWBY pauses and furrows her brow, looking up at Neo. "This is weird, right? We used to, fight?" Neo thinks about it for a moment before shrugging. RWBY replies, scratching her head, "Still, I feel like I should apologize? I did throw you off the last airship we were on together." Neo writes back, "Well, if I can throw you off this one, we're even." RWBY laughs nervously and scrunches up. "You're still kinda scary." Neo smirks down at RWBY before the airship gives an uncomfortable jerk. RWBY and Neo's attention returns to the console as RWBY professes, I didn't do that! On the rear controls, Crow snaps. "That wasn't you, RWBY, they're getting closer. Neo, step in. Driver's ed is over." RWBY pouts but slips aside as Neo falls into the seat. Weiss and Ren stumble forward into the cockpit, with Weiss asking, "How much longer till we get to shore?" RWBY and Neo look out at the approaching horizon and RWBY says, 10 minutes? Glancing to Neo for confirmation. Neo nods back, reaffirming RWBY's estimate. Ren is the first to speak. "Can we go any higher?" Crow responds, "We don't have enough fuel." The airship rocks again and an alarm goes off. We see an indicator on Crow's screen begin to blink and he tacks on, "And now we have even less. Seatbelts on, everyone!" RWBY nods and moves into the rear hold, clapping her hands. "Everyone wake up! Put your tray tables away!" Everyone in the hold begins to rouse, with Yang asking, "What? Are we there yet?" In the background, Ren folds up the tea tray he and Weiss were using and stows it. Ruby walks over and wrenches open the side door, letting icy cold air into the compartment as she pokes her head out. In the background, Nora startles awake. "What the hell, Ruby?" Below the airship we find the ocean, filled with inky black shapes swarming over one another. Domed, bony heads periodically pop out, revealing an alarming number of mermaids still in dogged pursuit of the airship. Several open their fanged maws and fire off high-pressure blasts of water, harrying the manta. Beside Ruby, Nora pokes her head out and yells down at them, "Don't you guys take a hint? We're not interested in you!" She then whips out her grenade launcher and fires. "I'm taken!" The grenade sails into the swarm and vanishes uselessly. Ren runs up and pulls Nora back in. "Nora, that isn't helping." And Nora replies cheerily, "Don't worry, it was my last one," prompting John to balk at her, suddenly more awake. "Why would you waste that?" Nora rolls her eyes. "We're going to be in Atlas in like a minute." Crow yells back, "What about seatbelts on? Does no one understand?" As everyone sheepishly or comedically strap themselves in, Crow dials up a number on his scroll, all while the ship begins to take even more hits. The phone rings for an agonizingly long time before it cycles to an automated response.
"Hi, you've reached the Atlesian Armed Forces Central Command. For active military personnel, press 1. For retired military personnel, press 2. For military personnel on standby, press 3. For..."
And this continues as we cut outside the manta, where it's deftly weaving between blasts from the mermaids, their attacks beginning to crystallize in the freezing air. Eventually, the call ticks over to,
"For foreign huntsmen, press 9.
Prompting the quickest finger movement Crow has ever performed. After an awkward moment of phone drone, the same voice ticks on.
"Thank you for calling the Atlesian Armed Forces Central Command. Please input your 15-digit foreign registration code."
Crow scowls down at the scroll. "What the hell?" And he's cut off as a heavy jolt rocks the manta, and an even louder alarm begins to blare. Neo points to an on-screen indicator that they've lost an engine, and Crow tosses the scroll aside, trying to focus on flying. Below him, Neo is sorting through a map of the local coastline and spots something. Flicking the screen, it pops up on Crow's readout, and he replies, "Good work, short stuff," before steering the ship off left as best he can. We cut to a low shot of what appears to be the end of a street that dead ends at a cliff. Sitting on the cliff is a small flock of penguin-like creatures with walrus tusks, minding their own business as, in the far distance, we see the blurry shape of the manta coming into focus through the snow. The flock scatters as it bursts overhead, one engine on fire, and it drops as it makes its way over the street, skidding to a halt in the center of an intersection. There is stillness as everything comes to a final stop and the manta settles into place. This content and the rest of the content on Celtic Phoenix is brought to you by the wonderful people supporting the channel through Patreon. For just $1 or more, you can gain access to the Tundra Discord server, where you can interact with me and a whole host of my fellow internet colleagues, such as the other members of Team Frostbite and the Team Jacked podcast. Become a part of our regular bad fanfiction nights that happen every Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time by joining our chat and adding your commentary to the reading. You can also join by becoming a member of the Celtic Phoenix YouTube channel, with the additional bonus of gaining access to a bunch of sweet emoticons during every one of our streams, such as the Team Jacked podcast, which airs every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But if either of those are too much for you, you can always subscribe to the channel, enable alerts, like this video, and share it around to all your friends. Thank you all so much for watching, and we now return you to your regularly scheduled fixing. Inside, Crow leans back in his seat, asking tiredly, "Everyone all right?" The response he receives, other than a thumbs up in the foreground from Neo, is the sound of John vomiting. Yang shrieks, "John!" and he groans, "I just woke up, what do you want from me? I want you to keep your breakfast down!" Slowly, the crew untangle themselves from their seats and the crash. Blake is the first to clamber out, shivering into her jacket and pulling up her hood. As the rest of the crew pile out, the camera pans back and reveals in a wide shot that they have landed on the outskirts of a small mining town. There's only a few people on the street, most poking their heads out of their homes or businesses, but even by small town standards, there seem to be very few people present. The most prim of them wear unkempt business clothing, while the remaining some are dressed for industrial jobs or labor. Ruby trips out of the airship and lands on the concrete. She stands and scratches her head as she says, "Well, you know, any landing you can walk away from, right, Weiss?" Weiss stares at her unamused. "Ruby, A man died. RWBY flinches. Sorry. Yang jumps down beside Blake and observes where they are. There doesn't seem to be many people, before raising her voice and saying, "And they're not very helpful." Blake, hugging herself for warmth, nods at a large SDC logo on a nearby wall. It's a mining town. They're all probably busy leaving for Mantle. It's the off-season. Weiss blinks at Blake. I'm surprised you know that. And Blake replies with a wry shrug. I had friends who were from Atlas before you. Weiss opens her mouth to respond, but is interrupted as a middle-aged woman approaches them. She looks warily at the crashed ship and asks, "Excuse me, are you the huntsman we asked for? Thank God you're here. The problem's just been getting worse and worse. We were worried no one was coming." Everyone cocks their head at her and Blake's ears perk up, catching the woman's attention. She frowns. "Oh, I figured we weren't a priority. Well, any help we can get." She continues, looking at Blake, and then looking over at the rest of the cast. RWBY steps up beside her team and nods. "Don't worry, ma'am. We'll do our best." Yang turns to RWBY and says, baffled, "RWBY, we're the ones that need help." RWBY shrugs and waves towards the townsfolk. "But we can help them!" From behind, a voice cuts into the conversation. "We should be helping ourselves!" They all look back to find Roman, glaring at them as he pulls Neo from the wreckage, only to be blasted aside by a pressurized beam of water. Neo falls back into the ship while Roman tumbles over the cockpit, his head now encased in ice. Everyone drops into battle stances. The middle-aged woman runs off yelling, "Good luck!" And any townsfolk that had been outside quickly lock themselves inside. The crew find the mermaids behind them, crawling up the cliffside, scattering the penguin creatures and gunning right for the airship. Interestingly, some of the mermaids slowly lock up and freeze as they attempt to climb the cliff, falling back into the water. What follows is a desperate fight sequence between our protagonists and the Grimm. The fight is messy, with only half the team in a functional state. RWBY, Weiss, John, Nora, and Ren take up the main line of defense, fending off the mermaids with some level of ease, but being stretched thin as they need to pick up the slack. Nora is limited only to melee without any grenades, and mid-fight, RWBY and Ren both run out of ammunition. Crow starts out as effective as ever, but as the fight progresses, he begins to find himself slipping, with bouts of confusion and double vision causing him to miss critical attacks. The effects of his withdrawal were muted when they were in the Manta, but under the physical strain, the side effects are now front and center. The visual noise becomes so dissonant that he has to close his eyes to still his equilibrium. Ironically, it looks like he's fighting drunk as a result. Roman, meanwhile, is a comedic mess, with him and Neo fumbling around the street trying to break the ice around his head. All attempts fail, especially when Neo tries to kick the ice and only manages to stub her own toe. Yang is initially off balance, trying to swing her missing arm, only to realize it's not there with a flat, "Oh," before she gets blasted into a wall with a "Yeah!" Her hand pops out of the rubble with a thumbs up, and she says, "I'm good," and she returns to the fight. She manages to slowly correct herself, settling into a one-armed stance, and though it's clear she's not at her prime, she taunts the Grimm confidently with a bring it hand gesture. Of the main cast, Blake is struggling probably the most, having lost Gamble last volume. She's been reduced to using only Shroud, the sheath for her weapon, and its shortened ribbon, limiting her reach extensively and choking her natural fighting style. At one point, she gets backed into a corner and reflexively she reaches for Wilton Blush at her hip. She hesitates, her hand resisting grasping it, before RWBY swings by and kills the mermaid attacking her. Shaking the spiders out of her head, Blake dives back into the fray. By the end of the fight, our heroes are tired but victorious, with all of the mermaids dead or frozen solid in the winter cold. As most of the team busy themselves shattering the remaining mermaids, Blake walks over to the still struggling Roman and swiftly brings Shroud down on his head, shattering the ice. Roman sucks in a desperate breath and falls to his knees. Blake frowns, disappointed. That didn't work. Roman wheezes as Neo tries to help him up. What do you mean, didn't work? Blake smirks and turns away, walking back to the others. RWBY observes the impromptu battlefield proudly as the woman from before peeks her head out of a window. Turning to her with a cheeky grin, RWBY yells up, "Don't worry! Your problem is solved! It's safe to come out now!" The woman frowns down at RWBY. That's nice, but that wasn't the crab. RWBY's face goes blank. The what now? A rumbling originates from the center of the mining town and all eyes turn the opposite direction of where the mermaids had come from. Rounding a corner by smashing through several buildings is a 2-story tall crab grim that is making a beeline right for them. RWBY gives a flat, "Oh," before about-facing and calling, "John! Karkanos! On our 6! What's a Karkanos?" "Crab Grim! Rabbit with Blake's ribbon? It's broken! Are we sure Nora doesn't have any more grenades? Do you think she'd hide them?" The entire group begins to backtrack along the street, but the Karkanos has already picked up enough speed to catch up to them. It sweeps forward with both claws, hitting everyone but Crow, who is forced into his bird form to slip away. John, Nora, Blake, and Neo are slammed into the buildings on one side of the street, with John going through a window. Roman and Ren are thrown forward onto the road, and RWBY, Yang, and Weiss are forced through the wall of a building on the opposite side of the street. The claw that hit them carves a large arc in the building, opening a massive hole and leaving the 3 buried in debris. Weiss and Yang are either pinned by debris or buried underneath. RWBY herself is the only one that can wriggle free to stand, using crescent rows to prop herself up. She tries to pull it free, but its extended blade is trapped under a slab of concrete. We find her silhouetted in the cavernous hole in the wall, the 2-story Karkanos bearing down on her, and the world goes silent. A flash of green blinds the screen, as a brilliant emerald light cuts down the center of the giant crab. The halves split apart and collapse, tethers of grim liquid trying to hold the shape, peeling away, revealing a lone figure hovering in the air behind it, haloed in a brilliant green glow. RWBY uncoils and stares in awe at the figure as if she'd seen a ghost. The figure descends like an angel, coming to rest on the sidewalk below. Though her appearance has been modified, looking slightly older and more refined, it is very clear that the girl who just saved them was Penny Polendina, seemingly returned from the dead. There is silence as everyone recovers from the Karkanos attack. We get to see every one of their reactions as they get a clear look at her, and across the board it's a mixture of shock and awe, and a little bit of worry from Roman and Neo. As the pause begins to edge into uncomfortable, RWBY staggers forward on wobbly legs, tears prickling in the corner of her eyes as she asks, "Penny?" Penny glances up at RWBY when her name is called. After a moment's pause, Penny's pupils widen with confusion. "Ruby Rose?" This gives RWBY all the energy she needs to rush into Penny's arms and hug her for dear life. She begins to cry into Penny's shoulder, and for a split second, Penny blinks down at her, unsure how to react. Eventually, the confusion melts away into a grand smile and she returns the hug. "It is so good to see you. What are you doing in Atlas?" RWBY eventually pulls away, sniffling, but they aren't given any time to speak to one another. There's the ring of gunshots, and a mermaid straggler that had been lunging for the two of them is turned to smoke by a hail of automatic fire. Before we can find the source of the shots, we're distracted by the lumbering speed of a second Karkanos, trundling down the road. The crew outside rush to their feet, either to flee or defend themselves, when an ear-splitting trumpet note cleaves through the air. From below the crab, a wave of sound launches it up into the air, and a moment later, a hooked whip sinks into its body, flipping it 180 degrees. It lands upside down, its legs flailing to stand up, only for a rainbow blur to streak across its body, cracking the joints between its shell and its limbs, with heavy bludgeoning smashes. Coming to a stop atop its shell is Neon Cat, and walking out in front of it are Flint Cole and a handsome man wearing a confident grin. RWBY blinks at them, still clinging tightly to Penny's side, and Penny is smiling at them proudly when a voice breaks out over them. "Penny, heartfelt reunions come after every threat is neutralized." Approaching the two is CL Soleil, who casually shoots yet another mermaid that was creeping towards the crew without even looking. Neon hops down from her perch, rolling her eyes at CL while helping Blake to her feet. Chillax, CL, it's just besties catching up." Flynn follows that with a smirk as he fishes John out of the broken window. "Jealous the defender of Mantle has friends other than you?" CL glares at them, cheeks a dusty maroon. "Would you both pretend to act professional?" Penny giggles into her fist at the conversation, which prompts the teary-eyed RWBY to break into her own chuckles. The handsome man, older by at least a decade than the rest of the squad, steps into the center of the street, motioning with his hands to bring down the energy. Okay, let's keep focused, 32. Now can someone tell me who our guests here are?" John, brushing himself off with Flint's help, answers, "We're, friends of Penny from Beacon. Sir?" The man looks at them with some level of confusion and concern, especially Roman, who is helping Neo out of a snowdrift. Then he looks to their downed airship. "You're students? You came here all on your own?" Yang, walking out from the crumbling building with Weiss, clarifies. "No, we're traveling with..." She's cut off as Crow comes flying down in his bird form, shifting while inside an alley and sliding to a halt outside before completely face-planting thanks to his shot balance. Yang perks. "Oh, yeah, there he is." Crow pushes himself to standing, blinking away the stars in his vision. The handsome man stares down at him with concern. You, don't look so great." Crow shrugs through a wince. "Then better." He glances around and gets a read on the situation. "Introductions, I take it?" Holding out his hand, he says, "Crow Branwyn." The man takes it and likewise says, "Clover Ebisu." Clover waves out over the other 4 members of the squad. "This is Strike Team 32. We're Mental's Rapid Response Unit. And I guess we're your welcoming committee. Mind telling me what you're doing here with, that?" He motions over to the inoperable Manta. Ruby, finally divesting herself from Penny, wipes her eyes and replies, "We're here to speak with General Ironwood. We have important information for him." Clover nods neutrally. "Do you now?" Crow pulls out his scroll and holds it up. "I'm a close personal friend of his. He's gonna want to hear what we have to say." Clover takes the scroll and looks at it, CL leaning over his shoulder as he winces and says, That's unfortunate." Handing the scroll back to Crow, he grimaces as he says, "You're all under arrest." There's a beat before Nora asks the question on everyone's minds. "What?" All of the scrolls among RWBY Junior Kern ping, and all of them open up the received messages. CL steps forward with a tablet, reading off a list of violations. Partaking in combat within city limits without a Huntsman license, operating dangerous weaponry without a Huntsman license. As she continues to read, we see Ruby reading along, muttering quietly, "Oh, so that's how you spell that." CL continues in the foreground. Damage to public property, damage to personal property, public endangerment, public disturbance. Her voice trails off briefly as she glances over to see Roman and Neo, who have been watching the situation with some level of amusement. She taps her scroll, and 2 counts of cavorting with known terrorists. Suddenly finding himself involved, Roman goes deadpan. "I know! Can you believe it? Blake Belladonna, former member of the White Fang! How scandalous!" CL blinks at her tablet, looks up to Blake, then back down, pressing a few more keys and muttering, 3 counts. Blake, already wide-eyed at their imminent arrest, turns to Roman and shoots him probably her harshest glare yet. "I don't like you." Crow looks over to Clover, baffled. "Credentials not good enough now?" To his surprise, it's CL that answers, very formally. "Forgeries have become a considerable issue in the last few months." Clover piggybacks off that with a rueful shrug. "All Outlist personnel have had their credentials updated. Yours don't pass the sniff test. Sorry, but you're all coming with us." Ruby looks to Penny and asks, with an awkward chuckle, "Is this really necessary?" Penny smiles back apologetically at Ruby before she cuffs her. We then cut to Ruby and the crew being loaded into a prison transport. The door shuts, the screen cuts to black, and Ruby groans, "Aw, man."